Hello, Gene Schwimmer here. Welcome to today's vlog. I'm going to start out with a little bit of, well, it's temporary good news. That's the bad news, that it's only temporary. But here's a headline: Biden's agenda faces early hurdles with a divided Senate. The good news in this is something that I didn't know. I did not know this until I read this article. We have right now an evenly divided Senate. Of course, Kamala Harris, the vice president, can break ties, but only when the Senate is evenly divided. That's one piece of good news, because there are some moderate Democrats that I don't think are going to go for some of the crazy left-wing stuff that the crazy left-wing Democrats want to force down the throats of the American people. But they are trying to, well, it's a power-sharing arrangement. That's what happened the last time the Senate was evenly divided. They have to work out some kind of a power-sharing arrangement because neither side has a majority as far as committee assignments, things like that. So the Republicans, Mitch McConnell, is insisting that as part of this new power-sharing arrangement, well, before it can even be discussed and settled, the Democrats have to promise that for the next 2 years at least, there will be no revoking of the filibuster. The filibuster will, well, I mean, it's already gone for judges, but as far as legislation, the Democrats have to promise, that has to be part of the deal, that the legislative filibuster must remain in place. That has to be part of the deal. It has to guarantee that the Republicans will be able to filibuster anything they don't like for the next 2 years. Obviously, that could change in 2 years with the next election, depending on, well, I'm hoping it turns out that the Republicans retake the Senate. But the point is that if it's not exactly 50-50 anymore, then there would be no well, there would be no justification for a power-sharing arrangement. But that's where they are now. What I did not know is I was expecting that because Kamala Harris could break ties and because, well, you can't really call him a majority leader, Chuck Schumer. He would be in charge, but there's no majority. It's evenly divided. But what I did not know, I was expecting that with the new Congress, that all the chairmen of all the committees would switch from being Republicans to being Democrats. But, and that ultimately probably will be what happens. But for now, the Republicans remain in charge of all the committees. All the Republican committee chairmen, they stay right where they are until this arrangement can be made for a power sharing. And that power sharing arrangement will not be made until and unless the Democrats, Chuck Schumer, agree that the filibuster will remain in place for the next 2 years. So that's, we'll see how it shakes out, but I think what's going to happen, and I mean, if you're Mitch McConnell, why would you give up all the committee chairmanships? So they're going to keep the chairmanships, and I would assume that, well, they'll keep them temporarily, but I assume that Chuck Schumer and the Democrats are going to have to cave and assure that this filibuster stays in place. And I think there will be hell to pay if the Democrats gain seats in the midterms, and then anytime they eliminate the filibuster, it's going to come back to bite them, just like eliminating the filibuster for judges came back to bite them. Otherwise, they could have filibustered Trump's Supreme Court nominees. Now they can't. They couldn't. And, well, it would be nice to, if they get rid of the filibuster, if the Democrats do that, that means that the Republicans, when they retake the Senate, which will happen sooner or later there will be a Republican House, Senate, and White House, and then they could just outright repeal and replace Obamacare because the Democrats would no longer be able to filibuster. So I want to get that little piece out there. Now what I'm going to show you today, well, we'll start with some bad news. I consider it bad news. It's going to be kind of fun, on the other hand, to see how the Democrats whitewash this, but This is Joe Biden's first day as president. He held a little press conference, or he did a signing ceremony, something like that, and he took questions from the press. I want to show you how it went. I'm going to show you a couple of clips. Here is the first one. Watch.
You can review this entire plan, by going to whitehouse.gov. It is so detailed, it is over 198 pages. And complete detail what we're going to do. Our plan starts with mounting an aggressive, safe, and effective vaccination campaign to meet.
And if that didn't bother you here, or if that didn't bother you enough, here is clip number 2.
Vaccines. Thank you, guys. Is that high enough? Shouldn't you set the bar higher? That's basically where the U.S. is right now.
When I announced it, you all said it's not possible. Come on, give me a break, man.
Come on, you guys.
Mr. President, good start. 100 million. Thank you.
Let's go, Chris. Let's go. Come on, you guys. Let's go. Thank you so much, you guys. Let's go. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Please look away. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Welcome back. And what can I say except that is our president for the next 4 years. Do you not feel just reassured and happy to have Joe Biden as your president? I think there's going to be, well, I see it as an irony right now because he's only been in office 1 day. He's obviously, well, they were talking about using the 25th Amendment, well, misusing the 25th Amendment to force Trump out of office. But what you just saw in those 2 videos is a classic argument for imposing or invoking the 25th Amendment to get Biden out, which unfortunately would mean a President Kamala Harris. But you can see he's not all there. You saw that in the first clip, and in the second clip, well, he was asked, it wasn't even a very tough question, nothing compared to what Trump gets, and he just spouted off on the reporter who asked the question, then he ended the conference and he just got up and he walked out. Well, anger is a sign of dementia, of Alzheimer's. That is one sign, and I don't see it getting, we'll see how it goes for the next 4 years. But I am not hopeful from what I saw just in the first day. I think they're going to be keeping him under wraps, and he's not going to be talking to the press very much, but he's still making decisions and he still signs legislation. I'm going to be talking about that more and more going forward. Today, though, I want to do a little show and tell. I want to talk about riots and riots. So, well, I'm going to show you a couple clips. The first one is, well, let's make it a quiz, okay, a game. I'm going to show you 2 things, and you tell me which one is the riot, okay? Here we go. Here's the first clip. Watch this one. That was the first clip. Now, remember, the question is, tell me which clip shows a riot. So that was the first clip. Here is the second clip. If you said number one, I disagree with you. Or if you're saying they are both riots, I don't see those both as riots. Now, what are these? The first clip is, of course, the trespassing. Well, you can't even really call it trespassing because it's the people's house, the Capitol building. We, the public, have a right to enter. It's an occupation. That's basically what they did. They occupied the Capitol building the same way we saw other activists, Democratic activists, occupying state capitals, and those were not called riots. I would also mention Occupy, because I lived in New York for 40 years, so I was there for, I only moved a couple of years ago, I was there for Occupy Wall Street. Anybody remember Occupy Wall Street? It went on for week after week after week, maybe months, I don't remember exactly, but you had all these unwashed hippie activists, anarchists occupying Zuccotti Park. It's called Zuccotti Park. It's about a block from the World Trade Center. They were there, and I understand from people that I used to work in, you can see a black building in the background maybe in some of the photos. I used to work in that building as a temporary word processor, actually in a few buildings in the area, and I was no longer working in the area. I was no longer a word processor when this Occupy Wall Street happened, but I recall reading and hearing that the smell was pretty bad. So I'm not disappointed that I missed that. You know, I'll throw something in. I used to work in the World Trade Center as a temporary word processor. I worked the night before 9/11. I work a midnight shift. I was working midnight shifts at a law firm called Brown and Wood. I still have the ID card somewhere to you know, get from one floor to the other to go through doors. But anyways, I was there, put it this way, I work a midnight shift. I was working a midnight shift. If I had been there the day after the day I was there, I would be leaving around 8:30 in the morning, and I would have been caught up in 9/11. So I guess that worked out for me. Oh, and by the way, well, we know 3,500 people died, but none of the people I worked with died. They were on the 57th floor, and it's a tragic way to put it, but they were there for, I wasn't there at the time, but they were there for, remember the World Trade Center, the bombing, the blind sheik and setting off the car bomb, or it was a van bomb in the parking area under the building. So when they heard the explosion, that's what one of the people that I worked with there said when I met him later. He said, we knew right away. He said, we got hit again. They knew right away. So they headed for the stairs on the 57th floor, and they walked down the stairs, and they got the heck out of there. So I guess that was, well, I know that was lucky for them. None of the people working in that law firm were killed. But I digress. I just want to go back to those two clips that I showed you. So the first one, they called that a riot. The second one, which I'm going to talk about now, that happened yesterday during the inauguration. So I'm going to give you a headline in a second, but that definitely was, to me, that's what I call a riot. You can see from the video, that is a riot. That is a full-scale riot. That is another example of the kind of thing that had been going on ever since March, the George Floyd death. So ever since then, they've been rioting all over the place in all of these cities, and the Democrats haven't said anything. They ignore all the riots since March, and they ignored this one. Now, this one that I just showed you in the clip, and I also put a thumbnail up as a title of this vlog. Well, you must have heard and read all these Democratic pundits saying, and you've read them writing, that Trump was the cause of all the dissension and all the tension in the country and all those riots too. They blame everything on him, and they said once Trump is gone and there's a Democrat in the White House, everything's going to be hunky-dory. Everything is going to be fine. Everything would disappear. Well, here's a headline. Quote, "We don't want Biden. We want revenge for police murders, imperialist wars, and fascist massacres," unquote. Antifa mobs smash up Portland's Democratic Party HQ, burn U.S. flags in Denver, and run riot in Seattle in protest at Biden presidency. Remember when Trump was inaugurated in 2016, there were riots protesting his presidency? Well, now we have new riots all over the country. Portland, Seattle, and Denver. So far, all these blue states, they're protesting the Biden presidency. So they're not going away. The riots are still there. And what's going to be their excuse now? That this is Trump's fault too? So like I said, it's going to be kind of interesting to see how the liberal press, our biased liberal, craven press, handles this, because I expect this to go on. Which brings me to the final point I want to make. I mentioned recently, but I've mentioned also from time to time before, I think yesterday or the day before, something called the 13 Keys to the White House that were promulgated by a professor of American history, Allan Lichtman. So just to quickly summarize what Lichtman did, he created a prediction model for predicting who would win or which party would win a presidential election. What's unique about Lichtman's methodology is, well, first of all, the methodology itself, which I'll get to in a second. His approach is unique, different from all these other prediction models, but also because he has been 100% accurate. Lichtman, who again is an American history professor, went back or looked back at past presidential elections, beginning with the election of 1860. I assume he picked that election as his starting point because that was the first presidential election in which there was a Democratic Party and a Republican Party, Abraham Lincoln obviously being the first Republican president. But he looked at that election and elections since then for certain factors, certain historical events that seem to have a determinative effect on how the election turned out. So Lichtman looked at these factors and then started applying the methodology beginning, I believe, with the election of 1980, the Reagan election, Reagan-Carter. But ever since then, since he started using his methodology, unlike all the other prediction models, he has been 100% correct. That's why I kind of look askance at these prediction models, but I'm starting to take his very seriously because he's been right 100% of the time. What he did was to refine these factors into 13 true or false questions that start out as true, and if 5 or fewer are false, the party in power in the White House will get another term. If 6 or more, if more than 5 are false, the White House will change hands and the party out of power will become the party in power. As I said, one is that the candidate for the incumbent party is the sitting president. So if it's not an open election, if the president in power is running again, if that is true, that is 1 point in favor of the party in the White House staying in the White House. But if it's false, if it's an open election, that is a point against. Another one would be whether the incumbent party gains seats in the midterm election. If they gain seats, that is a point in their favor. That is true. If it's false, if they lose seats, then that is a point against them. And then, well, if you have an open election and then you have a loss of House seats, so that's 2 false. You see how this goes. So I'm not going to go through all 13. I am going to just give a little preview of what I see happening so far. Remember, 6 have to be false. If there are 6 false statements, or 6 of the statements are false, then the Democrats will lose in 2024, assuming that this model, which has been 100% correct so far, is correct in 2024. So, well, first of all, the House winning House seats or losing House seats, I am reasonably confident that the Republicans will gain control of the House. But even if they don't gain control of the House, I predict them picking up seats. And if that happens, that is one false. Another key is that the incumbent party candidate is charismatic. If it's somebody charismatic, say like Obama or Reagan, then that is a point in favor of the incumbent party staying in power. But if it's false, then it's a point against. Obviously, I don't think anybody, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, is going to disagree with me that Joe Biden is not a charismatic person. And well, we'll stick with Biden for now. So that's two false. And then the third one, which is why I'm mentioning it today, or another key, is that it says that there has been no ongoing civil unrest, social unrest during the incumbent president or the incumbent party's term. Well, that looks like that's to be false. We've had this riot on the first day of Biden's presidency. So I don't see this going down because you saw the headline, we don't want Biden, we want revenge, so on and so forth. They demonstrated against Trump. They demonstrated now against Biden. These are just crazy anarchists, and I don't see them just suddenly becoming peaceful because Biden is president. Quite the opposite. They are angry that he is president. They don't want any president. They don't want any government. So that is three. The point I'm getting at today is that's 3 out of the 6. So there's 3 more that have to be false, and then we can be sure that as soon as those other 3 lock into place, then at least according to Lichtman's 13 keys to the White House methodology, then you can be sure that the next candidate, or you can be sure that the Republican will win in 2024, or it could be a third party candidate, which is the another factor that a key is there is no significant third party. That was a factor when Perot ran in '92 and the Democrat Bill Clinton won. Well, there is talk of Trump starting a third party. If he does, I would guess that it's going to be a substantial third party. And if that is the case, we don't know yet, but if that is the case, then that's 4 out of the 6 false, and only 2 more have to be false, and the Democrats will lose. And that's important. The Democrats will lose. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's more probable, more likely that the Republican would win. But Trump is not your usual presidential candidate, and it's possible that a third party Trump, I think what I've been reading is that if he forms this party, it would be called the Patriot Party. So I'm going to use the Patriot Party. It's possible that the Patriot Party could win in 2024, but we would know that the Democratic Party would not win. And we can just add a couple more here. I just said earlier that another factor is that the candidate for the incumbent party is the sitting president. Biden, the conditions he's in and the age he will be, 82, I find it hard to believe that he's going to run for re-election in 2024. It remains to be seen. But if he did not run for re-election, that's 5. That's 5 out of the 6. And then another factor would be whether there is, I guess, just a very contested primary. I don't remember Lichtman's exact wording, but you have to remember in the primary for the 2020 election that there were something like 17 Democratic candidates. So there were a lot of candidates, and I would imagine that would happen again. You would have maybe some of the same people. So if that happens, if Biden does not run again, I said that's 5, and if there is a real food fight over picking the next candidate, then that's 6. That's it. 6 are locked in, and the Democrats will lose in 2024, and there are other factors that, well, if the Republicans gain control of the House or the Senate, they need to investigate Hunter Biden. They should be doing that anyhow, but if the big guy is proven, if Biden is proven to be the big guy, that is a scandal, and that is another key, that there is no scandal. So if there is a scandal, then that's false, and that's 7. So I'm not going to go through the whole list, but you see, you don't have to be, the message to the Republicans is to hold these hearings, if for no other reason, so that there's a scandal, so that you flip another key from true to false. So that is important. Keeping him, another key is a foreign policy success, a major foreign policy success. So we don't want, we don't want in any case the JCPOA being reinstated. But if that doesn't happen, the whole point is you want to keep Biden, which you would anyhow, from having any major domestic policy triumph like an Obamacare. That would be a point in his favor. That's another key. So if that's false, that's another key against him. And the same thing for a foreign policy success. That is another key. We don't want Biden to have a major foreign policy success. I've almost gone through all 13 keys, but you see the point. Just be a little bit hopeful, and on the other side, I just have to say honestly, I hope these riots stop, even if it means that we don't trip a key from true to false, and even if it means Biden gets reelected, because we don't want to see all this. I'm just calling them as I see them, put it this way. I'm not hoping for more riots. I just want to be clear on that. What I am hoping for is a thumbs up if you like this video, and maybe you could share it with anybody you think would also like the video. Got any comments? Comment section below the video, where you can also ask questions, suggest future topics. You could subscribe. I would love that too if you could subscribe. And you could visit my music channel and listen to my original music. There's a link there to my other channel, my music channel. You could also know how much I appreciate the time that you spend with me, those of you who do spend time with me, and especially those of you who watch the entire video. But most of all, I look forward to seeing all of you again. And until I do see all of you again, bye.